On March 9, 1979, 18-year-old Janie Landers slipped quietly away from the Fairview Training Center in Salem, Oregon. Fairview was a residential facility for those with developmental disabilities and mental health problems. Janie stood at 5'1", 105 pounds, and had the developmental age of about an 8-year-old. She'd run away before from Fairview, but she always returned within the same day. And so there wasn't a huge cause for alarm at the school right away. However, as days went on, it became clear that this was different this time. And actually, a female employee of Fairview would come forward and state that she saw a young lady who she believed to be Janie on the day that she disappeared, standing and talking to a man next to a gold car. This man, coincidentally, fit the description of Janie's counselor at her school, and maybe the reason that she ran away. He had told her that day that he would no longer be able to deal with her one-on-one due to insurance issues, and she was upset by this and maybe ran away because of this. However, she's now seen by another employee of Fairview potentially standing and talking to Bill Graff the day that she disappeared. And more on that in a minute. The police would, circle in on him as their main suspect initially. And on March 14th, 1979, 5 days after her disappearance, a rural landowner would stumble across a body about 30 miles away from Fairview. And police would respond and find the corpse of a young woman who would turn out to be Janie, lying face down, and she'd suffered multiple stab wounds to the neck. The cause of death was actually a blow to the back of the head, however. Janie had some hairs in her fist still after her death, and likely from fighting off her attacker, which may also be why she wasn't sexually assaulted, because she fought so hard. Initially, the detectives zeroed in on Bill Graff, her guidance counselor at the school, and believed that he had something to do with her death. His description matched up, and now they had a sketch based off of the eyewitness account from that employee at Fairview that day. And Bill Graff, denied that he had anything to do with it. He took a polygraph and passed it, and he was kind of ruled out as a suspect. And that led to 2 other suspects. So at the school, Janie had a roommate named Cheryl, and they had an ongoing feud, it seemed. And actually, weeks before her death, Janie had actually dumped hot chili on Cheryl, her roommate, giving her severe burns. And Cheryl had a boyfriend named Ray, who had been overheard making statements about how he wanted to hurt Janie, and he became a suspect. However, it never really panned out. 10 years later, Cheryl and Ray had broken up, and Cheryl, Janie's old roommate, had come forward and told police that Ray had an earring, and Janie was missing an earring when she was found. And that kind of led police back to him, but it ultimately, there was nothing really linking him to the crime. They never found the earring, and that was that. And this case went cold. Any viable leads had dried up. And that leads us to 2015, 34 years after the murder. Janie's sister Joyce called the Oregon State Police and pressed them to reopen the case. And by now there was a new lead detective, a Detective Hinkle, who took over the case and started to look at it again. And he realized one thing based off of the autopsy and the evidence at the scene. He believed that the attacker's knife did not have a hilt on it, basically, which stops the hand. It's basically a separation between the blade and the handle on a knife, which would prevent your hand from slipping when you're stabbing into something. And usually a violent attack with a knife with no hilt leads the attacker to oftentimes be cut. And going off this suspicion, he sent off Janie's shirt for DNA testing. And as he suspected, there was, foreign blood found on the shirt, not just Janie's, but a male attacker's blood. And they would actually enter this into CODIS. And as luck would have it, they got a hit. And it was not someone that they had suspected. He was not somebody on the suspect list. However, he should have been. It was Gerald Dunlap, who had been sentenced in 1961, years prior to Janie's death, to 99 years in prison in Tennessee for rape, of which he only served 12 years. He was then paroled in 1973 and made his way to Oregon, where he got a job at Fairview, working with a bunch of young people with disabilities, vulnerable people. They let this guy, who was convicted of rape and should have spent the rest of his life in prison, go out and not only get out of prison, but then go get hired because Fairview didn't do any actual screening of the people they were hiring, apparently. In Fairview, it's not surprising. When you learn their reputation, they had a very spotty reputation for treatment of disabled people at their school. And so this guy's hired. He was working in the laundry center at the time of Janie's disappearance and murder, and yet somehow police never really thought to look into him. He just slipped under the radar. He was actually fired not long after Janie's death and disappearance for misconduct with female employees within Fairview. And yet police never looked at him. And of course, he would die in prison in 2002, long before he would become, known as the killer of Janie. Detectives believe that on that day, he lured Janie to his car, tried to sexually assault her, but despite her small size, she fought back, and ultimately he would kill her and get away with it for, over 30 years, and ultimately never see justice because he would die long before then. He was in prison actually in 2002 when he died. But that's that. He was serving a sentence for sexually abusing a minor, a family member of his, in 2002 when he died. This case is another one that doesn't feel great, but at least we get answers. Once again, DNA and advances in technology give those answers to this case, but there's just so many things that annoy you. Like, how did he get hired at Fairview? How did he get out of prison after only 12 years for something he was sentenced to 99 years for? Sometimes life just isn't fair. But that's my case this week, and I'll see you next week. I hope you guys enjoyed it.
You hush your mouth, boy.